Franklin Templeton, managing a massive $1.7 trillion, just dropped a bombshell. XRP is foundational to global settlement infrastructure. Now, picture BlackRock watching all of this unfold. How long can they really stay on the bench while Franklin Templeton and these other institutional powerhouses are making their moves on XRP?
What's about to unfold? I'm going to walk you through everything. Fresh updates just came in from Reese Merrick over at Ripple. Plus, we're unpacking the whole ETF situation, tracking where XRP's price might head given the demand we're witnessing for these ETFs, and honestly, that's just scratching the surface. All right, everyone, let's dive straight in. There's a mountain of information to unpack here, and I'm glad you're watching. Nate Garassi highlighted something. 1.7 trillion asset manager Franklin Templeton says XRP plays a foundational role in the global settlement infrastructure. Pay attention to this for a second. They're not being pressured into making this statement. Franklin Templeton chose to tell their customers this right now. These are investors who trust Franklin Templeton's advisors to steer their financial decisions in the right direction. That's Franklin Templeton's entire job. And look what they're doing, putting XRP up there as one of the best digital assets we've got. No question about it. Here's what I find wild. Where's all the chatter about Ethereum being this critical piece of global settlement infrastructure? Yeah, maybe someone mentioned it way back when, but today, radio silence. And this line gets me going. Will be highly interesting to see how the world's largest asset managers draw battle lines of around various crypto assets. BlackRock sitting out of XRP ETFs, for example. Let me break down what's happening here. BlackRock didn't wake up one day and decide to offer Bitcoin and Ethereum out of nowhere. Their clients banged on the door demanding access to these assets. So BlackRock opened the door and let them in. Fast forward to now, and you've got heavyweight competitors like Franklin Templeton squaring off against BlackRock for those exact same client dollars. Here's where things get interesting. One company starts selling something the other refuses to touch, and boom, clients pack up their accounts and move to Franklin Templeton to buy what they want. That's when BlackRock has their light bulb moment. Money's leaving. Clients are leaving. Suddenly, they're sprinting to launch the same products before the damage gets worse. Let me paint a picture of who's backing Franklin Templeton with their cash. These aren't your average investment shops. We're in heavyweight territory here. Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners has roughly $37 billion in play. Actis commands about $16 billion is sustainable infrastructure. Digital Bridge, a key institutional partner. Plus there's Benefit Street Partners, Private Credit Alternatives, Clarion Partners, Real Estate Equity, Lexington Partners, Private Equity Co-Investments, Western Asset Management Company, Fixed Income, Royce Investment Partners, Small Cap Equities, ClearBridge Investment. Now wrap your head around this. North of 13,000 investment firms orbit Franklin Templeton's ecosystem, and they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. XRP plays a foundational role in global settlement infrastructure. That line hits me every single time I read it. This stuff gets me fired up. All right, changing lanes completely now. Reese Merrick from Ripple. You might not recognize the name yet, so here's the deal. He's steering the ship as managing director across Middle East and Africa. The work he's putting in, phenomenal. He's planting Ripple's flag deeper, making XRP and RLUSD household names throughout those markets. He said last month, Ripple completed the acquisition of Hidden Road. Now, Ripple Prime, who serves 300 institutional customers, clearing $3 trillion across markets annually. That's not just news, that's an earthquake in the making. Picture this. Imagine waking up tomorrow and $10 billion, $12 billion is just casually running through the XRP ledger every day. We're not talking monopoly money here. This is real capital moving at lightning speed. Now layer G Treasury on top of that. They're pushing $34 billion daily on their own. Smash those numbers together and what do you get? We're knocking on the door of $50 billion with literally just these two operations. And here's what blows my mind. G Treasury's already locked in with more than 1,000 corporate clients. But wait, here's where the dominoes really start falling. All those corporate clients just unlocked the ability to access their cash whenever they need it, around the clock, any day of the year, and they're earning returns while they sleep. What does that do? It cranks up the heat on everybody else. The entire industry has to scramble because nobody wants to be the dinosaur still using yesterday's tools. It becomes survival of the fittest for premium services. And let's be real, Ripple's already lapping the competition. Ripple's acquisition of Hidden Road and launch of Ripple Prime is a major milestone because it puts Ripple in a unique position as the first crypto-native firm to own and operate a global multi-asset prime broker serving hundreds of institutional clients and clearing and settlement of trillions of dollars across markets annually. This gives substantial credibility to the scale of both Ripple's technology and, of course, the flagship assets XRP and RLUSD. The institutional access and adoption here, Ripple's Prime offers centralized access for institutions to trade, clear, and digital assets, derivatives, and fixed incomes. The FX market clocks $7.5 trillion in daily volume, and Ripple's already captured 90% of the global flow. So the question practically answers itself. Why are we still debating whether blockchain makes sense here? It's screaming at us. Now let's talk derivatives. Futures. The sheer amount of wealth tied up in those instruments is mind-boggling. We're floating around $1 trillion in notional value. Are these contracts destined for blockchain? Without question. When's it happening though? That's what keeps me up at night. Honestly, I bet money we're watching the opening act right now. This could pop off faster than anyone's expecting. This reduces operational complexity that attracts more traditional financial players and crypto. They also break down collateral structures and where RLUSD and XRP fit into the puzzle. We've dissected this pretty hard already in previous content, so if you want the full breakdown, go ahead and freeze the screen right here and absorb it. Take whatever time you need. As for me, I've got some fresh intel I'm dying to unpack with you, so let's shift gears and see what other pieces are falling into place. The question is, what is the high price for XRP? We have to factor in the average price of XRP at different levels to find out. This means that could be lower earlier and higher later. The result is the average from the current price. Use these conservative scenarios of $33.6 billion per year. Okay, so they're crunching numbers on US ETFs and projecting roughly $33 billion could flood in over the next 12 months. That's an insane amount of capital. Remember when JP Morgan dropped their estimate? They said 3 to 8 billion initially, then tweaked it to 4 to 8 billion. We're staring at projections that make JP Morgan's look tiny in comparison. But here's your reality check. Why do these massive institutions always undershoot? Because throwing around huge numbers creates panic. If they walked out tomorrow screaming 30 billion, markets would spiral into absolute madness. Just wanted you to grasp that dynamic before we dive deeper. XRP price factor conservative, $33.6 billion. Feast your eyes on these multipliers, 5x jumps, 10x gains, then 20, 40, 60, and a full 100x scenario. Real talk, hitting 225 XRP would be a complete game changer for so many holders watching this. Here's where my head's at. XRP cruising past 100 or landing at 200 opens the floodgates. Why couldn't it surge to $500? Why not $1,000 at that point? It could probably launch way beyond that level. That's the bet a lot of us are making right now. And that's precisely why so many of us aren't budging yet. Here's what I'm seeing. I guarantee a massive chunk of people are going to bail somewhere in that $90 to $100 zone. Think back to the Ethereum saga for a second. When it surged from whatever low point to $90 or $100, droves of people took their profits and ran. Fast forward a bit, and Ethereum went absolutely parabolic. We're talking $3,000, $4,000, came within striking distance of $5,000. So there's no way I'm rushing into any decisions right now. My approach? Kick back, dissect every piece of information coming my way, and figure out the absolute best path forward for my family. Now, Chad brings up something that really gets the gears turning. The only answer in this new ETF era is the price of XRP must go up in order to slow the rate of the asset manager. Here's what that actually means in plain English. If the price just camps out where it is,
These giant asset managers are going to devour every last XRP token they can find. Check this wild fact. Only about 3 billion XRP tokens are still hanging out on exchanges where regular people can buy them. The elephant in the room? All these shadowy OTC transactions and dark pool movements that these ETF providers have been quietly executing away from public view. Let me throw something at you that's been rattling around in my head. US regulation. Check this out. The current Clarity Act has this rule where Ripple can't hold more than 20% of the XRP supply. Problem is, they're sitting on roughly 45% right now, which opens up a massive can of worms. Could other companies already have their hands on pieces of that escrow? David Schwartz dropped some hints about this, talking about how those wallets might get sold off or chunks of the escrow could change hands before it even unlocks. Makes you think, have the big players like BlackRock or JP Morgan already been wheeling and dealing behind the scenes? Picture this scenario. ETF providers come knocking on Ripple's door, trying to negotiate some kind of arrangement. But flip it around. What if Ripple just turns around and goes, "Why would I cut you a special deal? If you want XRP that badly, hit up the exchanges like everyone else." Ripple totally has that option. They're holding all the cards here. The ball is completely in their court. This is something people need to wake up to, honestly. I've been around the block in this crypto world, seen the winners, seen the disasters, seen everything in between. At this stage of the game, nothing else in crypto is even on my radar anymore. Look, I'm pretty convinced we're going to see this whole space boil down to maybe 5, 10 real players. Everything else, honestly, most of it's going to crash and burn. That's not pessimism. That's just how technology works. The winners, though, XRP, Solana, Chainlink, possibly XDC, XLM, and the obvious heavyweights, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're going to vacuum up all the serious money. Every dollar looking for a real home is going to land in those assets. Now, yeah, meme coins aren't disappearing. They'll still be out there doing their chaotic thing. But here's where it gets interesting. When you've got institutional money coming in, when you've got the pros managing billions, they don't want to pick individual coins. They want the whole package. They want index funds that give them exposure to all the winners at once. And that approach, that's going to absolutely explode. Okay, so let's zoom in on the near future. This is how I think it unfolds. During ETF trading hours, the price goes up, doesn't need to be a time like 10 to 20 cents, which means the performance of the XRP ETF looks phenomenal. Then, like now, after hours, it goes flat or even dumps. But we might go right back up the next trading day. This builds up momentum and the narrative for a full price explosion in the next few months or less. The XRP futures went completely ballistic. You see that kind of frenzy, and it's basically telling you the spot price is gearing up for something big. Sunday's video laid it all out. We gave you the full roadmap to ride this wave while XRP was still chilling below $2. But here's the part that really got me thinking. Caroline Pham over at the CFTC, she's been absolutely stellar in her role. She recently had a sit down with Brad Garlinghouse and the Ripple squad. This woman gets it. She's exactly the type of regulator this space desperately needs. Right now, she's holding down the acting chairwoman position. Then she comes out and says this: lock in Ripple Prime, Ripple Payments, Ripple Custody, Ripple Stablecoin, powered by the XRP ledger. Now that phrase lock in jumped out at me immediately. Brad's been throwing that same term around too. Feels deliberate, you know, like there's some coordination happening behind the scenes. Canary XRPC numbers are up here. It is XRP taken assets under management. Another 3.193377 million day 8. Now let me break down these totals for you. For anyone tracking this stuff at home, I've got the full lineup here. Day 1, day 2, day 3, the whole series. And you can see exactly what volume numbers we've been pulling in. Here's where it gets good. Notice how stable this actually is. We're bouncing around 26, dropping to 19, climbing to 23, hitting 26 again, sliding to 17, down to 12, then landing at 18. See what I mean? There's real consistency happening here. This dropped right when all those competitor products were flooding in, but here's the thing. That value stream, Hasn't slowed down one bit. Now, peek at what we've got down here. 203 million just chilling there. And they're warehousing 149 million XRP. Wait a second though. Something doesn't quite click, does it? Like, why is 200 million dancing around 149 million without matching? So here's where my brain goes. Apparently there's this swap mechanism where people can convert their XRP straight into shares. Me personally, yeah, I'd probably pass on that, but hey, what do I know? I'm not sitting here with a financial advisor license. You thinking about pulling that trigger? Go hunt down someone who actually gets paid to navigate this maze. I'm gonna be straight with you. I'd much rather hold the real thing in my hands than own some paper that says I own the thing. That's just me though, you know what I'm saying? But look, you do you. Whatever works for your portfolio, right? So let's dive into what's happening with the Bitwise XRP ETF. The numbers, they're popping off. XRP assets under management are stacking up nicely. Check out what we've seen over the last 3 days. Day 1 brought in 25 million. Day 2 gave us 20 million, and day 3, 36 million. Add it all up, and we're sitting at 84 million total. Now the big question, how much XRP is actually sitting in these funds? All right, here's where it gets interesting. First 15 minutes pulls almost 10 million in volume. If 40 million per hour projection today, 260 million in volume. I've got another tracker pulled up here showing the flow. And man, the tech for monitoring this stuff live is getting really slick. Look what we've got. First 2 hours, 25.95 million total shares, leading Franklin Templeton $7.5 million today. The first hour alone brought serious volume. We were looking at roughly 105 million for the day's projection. Let's watch and see where this lands. So if you're someone who geeks out over tracking this stuff minute by minute, there's a new spot you should know about. xrp-insights.com just went live recently. And here's the thing, it's actually pleasant to navigate. I've bounced around different tracking platforms before and honestly felt like my head was going to explode. Just way too much chaos on one screen, you know? These folks actually thought about how humans process information. They've organized it into bite-sized sections that won't give you a headache. Your eyeballs will thank you. Anyway, swing by XRP-Insights if you want to stay plugged in. All right, my friends, that's a wrap on this one. You're all caught up now. I'll pop back in your feed when there's something new to share.